You've got questions, he always has an answer. It's Sean Hannity, this afternoon at 2, right before Joe Walsh at 5 on AM 560. The Answer.
Oh, don't bring me down. Oh, this is Sean's song. Why is this? This is your song? This is your jam? That's what you're saying? Rex Tillerson yesterday took a brief moment to hit back against all the rumors that he should be resigning. I don't know if you saw it, but he was hosting French Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian at the State Department and greeted the press as the two headed into a working lunch. And he was asked the question again. Well, you can hear it.
Hello, Mr. Secretary. Secretary Tillerson, have you already submitted a letter of resignation with an effective date in January?
That's ridiculous.
Thank you.
Ridiculous question.
She asked him, are you going to resign? Have you submitted your resignation papers? He said, that's ridiculous, and it's a ridiculous question. But for the past several months, multiple developments have indicated that Trump and Tillerson have been unable to politically synchronize with each other.
You know who's going to know? Jed Babbin.
Jed Babbin. And
he knows.
And he joins us right now on our Turnkey.pro answer line. Good morning, Mr. Babbin. How are you?
Well, please call me Jed, not Mr. Babbin.
Okay.
It makes me sound really old. Other than that, I'm fine. Other than a scratchy throat, how are you guys?
Good, Jed.
Yeah, so tell us, do you think Rex Tillerson, is it time for him to go?
Oh, absolutely. I don't think he's going to go. I don't think the president's going to fire him, although he richly deserves being fired.
Well, what is your point of contention with him? Why do you think this?
Well, he's just not a very good diplomat. He's supposed to be our lead diplomat as Secretary of State, and he's proven himself, at least in the past couple of weeks, of being rather completely inept. If you look at what he said a week ago today in terms of the North Koreans, he said, we want to talk. We really, really want to talk. We'll talk about the shape of the table. We'll talk about the weather. We'll talk about whatever you want to talk. As long as we talk. He was kind of whining and begging, and by doing so, essentially giving up on the negotiation before it even started.
Now, Jed,
so if someone is that inept, he really shouldn't be Secretary of State.
Jed, I've been consistent. I don't like him. And it's not just that American graffiti hairdo he's got. I've never liked him. I've never liked the fact that he has been collaborating basically for Exxon all these years with people who we should be aware of and who we should view through a suspicious glass. So I've never liked the relationship with former despots and in control like Vladimir Putin. I've never cared for him. Really. So I'm glad that everybody feels this way to see him go. My question to you is, who steps in place? Because the way it looks to me, Jed, now you and I filled in a while ago and you accused me of Obama being my guy when that's not the fact at all. I don't like the idea that we're in a 16-year war, Jed. I don't like the idea that the money that is flowing and we have no receipt on anything. I remember when Rumsfeld, before September 11th, they couldn't find $2.5 trillion. To me, it's about the money. It's about the kids that we send to foreign land. I want a strong national defense. I really do. But I want one that has some sort of logic to it. I don't want people all over. I still am confused about the guys in Niger. I don't like any of what's going on. Where am I wrong?
Well, how do I start? Pretty much everywhere. The basic point here is, Rex Tillerson is not disqualified because he's had connections with people overseas. That's actually a point in his favor. He's disqualified because he doesn't know how to conduct diplomacy. The fact is, we don't go over and conquer nations for the sake of empire. We defend our allies and our freedoms. Yes, the war in Iraq was a mistake. However, the fact of the matter is that wars are not determined by the validity of a war is not determined by its length. The length is determined by how well we fight and how well we work to defeat the enemy, and we haven't done very well over the past 16 years, which is another story entirely. So the real question here is, who do you want to step in? There are a lot of people out there. Pardon me. I mean, everyone from my old friend, former Virginia Governor Jim Gilmore, would make a terrific Secretary of State. There are several others out there. Mike Pompeo from Congress and now the CIA would probably be a very good candidate. And quite frankly, somebody like White House Chief of Staff John Kelly, who's got his head pretty well screwed on, straight. People like that. There are a lot of people who would be out there ready to take over for Tillerson, and he's just not the guy for the job.
Well, I mean, clearly we have to disarm North Korea somehow, some way. What role do you think China should play in this?
Well, first off, I don't think we can disarm North Korea peacefully. I just don't think it's going to happen. However, I think, China has to be at the table in any negotiation. It's the old story, don't deal with the monkey, deal with the organ grinder. the guy who is running the show has to be at the table if a negotiation is going to have any effect or have any real meaning. So China needs to be a party to the negotiation. They're not going to want to be. And quite frankly, if we demand it, it gives us an opportunity to put North Korea off for a long while, knowing full well that any negotiation is probably not going to be to our benefit. So there's a lot of ways we can deal with them, quite frankly, with missile defense and other things that are going to have to be put in place before any negotiation can be successful anyway.
Is it a term where you can negotiate? I'm a big fan, and I liked the proposal that we were going to do it economically, that China was going to really put the screws to North Korea, which I think would be great. Is there any way we can rationally proceed with that, or is it something where we're going to have to threaten tariffs to devalue our own dollar here in our country? Is there any way to do it through logic and conversation?
You're breaking up there a little bit, but anyway, the point really comes down to we cannot use economic means to disarm North Korea. Their whole position, their position in the world depends on threatening us with nuclear weapons, biological weapons, everything else with missiles. They justify their own existence to themselves by making those threats. So they're not going to back down. They're not going to disarm. China could disarm them. China could replace the regime, which would quite frankly be a really, really good thing if they decided to do that. Right now, I don't think they have any incentive to do that. So at some point, something like that might actually happen, but I'm not holding my breath. In the meantime, what we need to do is continue to isolate them, put pressure on China, and quite frankly, build the hell out of our anti-missile systems.
Jed Babbin, in your latest article in Spectator.org, you talked about President Trump's phone call that he made to Vladimir Putin, and then Putin called him back on Sunday. What are they discussing?
Well, they're discussing a lot of things. The second call is frankly the better one and more valuable. Our CIA came up with information on a terrorist attack that was about to occur on a major cathedral in Russia, and gave that information to the Russians, as we should have. And Putin called to thank Trump for the information. However, the previous phone call was the one that I was concerned with, the one where on Friday, Mr. Trump called Putin and asked for his help on North Korea. Quite frankly, the Russians have no reason to help us in North Korea. They're not going to help us in North Korea. And Mr. Trump's call to him was, it's not as bad as what Tillerson said in begging for the shape of the table, which invoked Vietnam and the failed negotiations there. But it still was rather inept for Trump to do.
I've been dying to ask you something, and it's not about Putin. Saudi Arabia, I've never been a big fan, per se, of Saudi Arabia. And
they're letting women drive now and vote.
Well, Prince Blinky owns Citibank and all that. But there's something going on there where, what is it? Is it his cousin took over and then they stripped how many billions away from people he didn't like? What exactly is going on in Saudi Arabia besides oil prices?
Well, there's a lot going on, but the focus of Saudi Arabia and Crown Prince bin Salman right now is to consolidate power, to make his population rather comfortable, and then to make sure that he is in a position to further oppose what's going on with Iran. You've got to understand that everything else aside, and quite frankly, literally nothing else counts as much as the Iranian threat. The Arab nations are almost wetting their pants over what's going on there, as they should, because they're all greatly threatened. Their national existence, not just their national security, is threatened. And they're very worried about everything from Hezbollah in Lebanon, which is, of course, an Iranian proxy. The Houthis in Yemen are an Iranian proxy. The Iranians themselves are in Syria with the Russians. They're all over the place. So what's going on here, is that the Saudis are very, very concerned about what's going on, and they're really putting everything else aside while they try to deal with that. And that's one of the reasons why the Palestinians had better make some sort of a deal with the Israelis right now, or the Arab nations are probably just going to toss them over the side.
Are we better off with the guy in charge now in Saudi Arabia?
Jury is still out on that. The problem with his father and all his father's predecessors were that they continued even, forevermore, and even since 9/11, on funding Saudi terrorism was basically the root behind a lot of things in Al-Qaeda and so many other terrorist groups. They've been funding terrorism for a long time. They still are funding terrorism. And unless and until they stop it, it's going to be pretty much impossible for us to do much about it.
All right. That is Jed Babbin. He is former United States Deputy Undersecretary of Defense and contributor to the Washington Times and the American Spectator. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it, and have a very Merry Christmas.
Well, thanks. Same to you. Sorry about the scratchy throat. I'll try to be in better voice next time.
It's all right.
No problem.
No problem.
I loved it.
Yeah. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.